Wow. Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade says he's over 200 pounds right now and is pondering retirement if he can't line up a big fight after it's announced that Billy Joe Saunders will likely fight Canelo Alvarez in May. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to my channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. Shout out to everybody for the support. Let's jump right into it. Now, I'm not going to read verbatim, but if you go to Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade's Twitter, there is some very interesting news and comments that he was making. He was kind of going back and forth with some of the fans. And in his tweets, he was stating that he was about 200 pounds or maybe even a little bit over 200 pounds. And he was talking, it was like almost depressing. If you see what's happened with the career of Demetrius Andrade, he was talking about going on unemployment and possibly retiring if he can't get a big fight. And he was also talking about Canelo possibly fighting against Billy Joe Saunders. One of the fans asked something to the effect of, "Are you going to that particular fight?" And he said, "What's the point?" And again, it's just sad what's happening to Demetrius Andrade and what has happened to Demetrius Andrade's career. This was a guy who is a U.S. Olympian, and I really started hearing about him. He was on HBO fighting Brian Rose and Vanes Matarosen, and I started hearing real good things about him shortly before those fights. So I was checking for him, and it's been that way ever since. But his former promoter and promotional team, not necessarily the biggest in boxing, and just throughout his career, the bigger fights have eluded him. He has a style that some people deem unwatchable. Networks haven't really paid too much interest. And then when he signed with Eddie Hearn and he signed with DAZN, based on the talent they had in the talent pool from 160 to 168, most people, including myself, assumed that there would be some good opportunities for Demetrius Andrade, since DAZN, was a breath of fresh air. It was a promoter who has frequent cards, and they had boasted that guys like Jermall Charlo needed to come to DAZN in order to fight the best and become big commodities. But in that space of time, you've seen Jermell and Jermall Charlo. Jermell, a guy being that somebody that Demetrius Andrade was scheduled to fight. You've seen their brands continue to grow. And then you have Andrade talking, and he sounds borderline almost depressed or disgusted with boxing, talking about he might retire, and he just sounds jaded and disenchanted. And I welcome all you guys to read his tweets. He just sounds like he's kind of dejected and kind of over it, and he realizes he's not getting the big opportunities. He's not getting any of the big fights, even though the guys should be available to him. And he's almost being set up with a Liam Walsh or whatever, Liam Williams fight. Liam Williams, really not a big name, but he's a big puncher. So maybe it could be a dangerous fight. And it's not the type of fight where Demetrius Andrade will get a lot of credit. Like if he beats, so he's going in there with the risk of a guy who looks like he has some good punching power. The two have shared an opponent, and Demetrius Andrade, I believe, went the decision with him, and Alantez Fox is the guy's name, and Liam Williams had fought him and knocked him out, and Liam Williams after was given credit by Alantez Fox, who has stated that Williams hits harder than Demetrius Andrade. So with Billy Joe Saunders, it was recently rumored and reported that he's gonna likely agree to fight Canelo in May. You just keep seeing Andrade get skipped over. Gennady Golovkin, he could have easily fought. I remember when Canelo failed his drug test, Golovkin said he wanted to keep fighting on the quote-unquote Mexican days. This was before DAZN. This one when HBO was still in the boxing game. And you had Triple G, who said he wanted to still fight on the quote-unquote Mexican dates, and Andrade offered to step in, but Triple G chose not to fight Andrade, not to fight Derevyanchenko, who the IBF said was his mandatory, but to instead, he instead chose to fight Vanes Matarosen, coming off an Erislandy Lara loss and a 2-year layoff. which really made no sense. And he was moving up in weight from 154 to 160. So this whole time, from that time and all the way to present modern day, you have Demetrius Andrade, who his skills aren't being sharpened because he's not necessarily the most active. And more importantly, he's not getting any of the big fights. And a guy, Billy Joe Saunders, who's a champion at 168, he failed a drug test and it canceled the fight for Andrade. It would seem to be that if that was given the situation, or like they were scheduled to fight, it seems to me that in a normal world, in a perfect world, you would have Billy Joe Saunders hoping to rectify that situation, but that couldn't be the furthest from the truth. The WBO took the belt from Billy Joe Saunders and put Andrade versus Walter Katandakwa, some random African fighter, in for the belt, and Demetrius Andrade, of course, won. They gave, even after failing a drug test, they gave an opportunity to Billy Joe Saunders to fight Andrade, to skip into the front of the line and fight Andrade, despite failing the drug test, to reclaim his belt if he could beat Andrade. But guess what Billy Joe Saunders decided to do? He moved up in weight and said, screw that. Then he was with Frank Warren, and Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn don't really work together. Billy Joe Saunders transfers over and signs with Eddie Hearn and leaves Frank Warren. So you would assume that fight becomes easier to make. And since Billy Joe Saunders has been signed to Eddie Hearn, he's fought guys like Martin Murray, and instead of fighting Demetrius Andrade, who has called him out time and time again. Andrade called him out for the YouTube KSI Logan Paul rematch card, and they had Saunders fight on the undercard, but it wasn't against Demetrius Andrade. Now he's talking about retirement. He's talking about being on unemployment, saying he's gaining weight. He just sounds like he's kind of mentally checking out because boxing hasn't been fair, you know? But I will say this, is life is tough. Andrade put himself in some of these positions. He made the decisions he made. He partnered with the people he made. So you have to blame Andrade for some of these reasons as well. The other part, you know, goes to the politics of the game and old media and some of the writers and stuff not putting any pressure on guys like Caleb Smith or Billy Joe Saunders or Triple G or Canelo to fight a guy that has skill, has a belt at 160, and face him. There's been no pressure outside of me and a select few people who have actually pushed for that fight. So, you know, it is what it is. This is the situation that Andrade is in. I don't know what his next move is, but fights like Artur Akov and Mad Zaleski after Daniel Jacobs beat him, you know, they might match him with like a Gabe Rosado. Like these just aren't the fights that will catapult him to the next level, you know what I mean? And it's just sad. It's just a sad cautionary tale in boxing. You got guys like Billy Joe Saunders who ducks Andrade, never reschedules a fight, failed a drug test, got his license pulled for misconduct multiple times, has been in the papers multiple times for misconduct and, you know, harassing drug addicts and different things like impersonating a police officer. Billy Joe Saunders just recently said he'll fight Andrade, and he said send the contract, and then now they're saying he's gonna fight Canelo. So everything is working against. DAZN really doesn't care about pushing for Andrade to get any big fight. That much is proven because he was signed to DAZN before Canelo Alvarez was, yet Canelo can fight who he wants, do whatever he wants. And even guys like Billy Joe Saunders, who again was with Frank Warren and then later came to Eddie Hearn and the DAZN situation, he's already getting rewarded with the Canelo fight despite failing the drug test. And that's not I personally would rather see Canelo versus Demetrius Andrade than over